Well, basically, Michelle, a reconsideration application is when you are now asking the Judge President, and that would be Mandi Samaya, to reconsider the judgment handed down by the Supreme Court of Appeal, which dismissed then the former president's latest bid to have Billy Downer removed from this arms deal trial. It's sort of like the application that was made to the Constitutional Court as well, which is something that was not necessarily always used in the law, where you basically ask the apex courts to also, in many ways, review their own decision, and that would be the final option, really, when it comes to that. So when it comes to the Supreme Court of Appeal, before going to the Constitutional Courts, which could still be an option for the former president if the reconsideration application is dismissed, this would be, the next step before going there. But Michelle, I just want to bring in someone who's been by the former president's side, Carl Niehaus. Today we're basically expecting, a postponement, but it would seem that the former president remains, adamant that he must continue with his fight to have Billy Downer removed, even though the courts at various levels, whether it's the permanency of prosecution, the leave to appeal application, have said the same thing. Why not just go to trial?
Well, I think President Zuma is absolutely correct to continue to insist that Mr. Billy Downer cannot be the prosecutor in this case. The history is there. The manipulation, the role that Mr. Downer played, even the very unacceptable role that he played with the leaking of medical records of President Zuma. So under the circumstances, President Zuma is absolutely correct to insist that Mr. Downer cannot be the prosecutor in this case. He is absolutely correct to follow all the channels, the legal channels that are available to him. And I was very happy that Mr. Justice Kuhn, in the last hearing, said that it is not a case of President Zuma using so-called Stalingrad tactics, but he's entitled to the legal relief that he's using, and is entitled to exhaust that relief, and therefore anyone who tries to say that President Zuma is acting outside the legal possibilities that is available to him is talking a lot of nonsense.
Mr. Niehaus, I quite like the fact that you've mentioned legal channels, because one could also ask that if you were so passionate about not having Billy Downer be a part of this trial, why didn't you go to the ethics office of the NPA? Why didn't you open the case and lay the criminal charges before this matter reached the stage that it did? Because this is what now informs or gives credence to this belief that the former president is trying to delay this trial. He had so many other legal channels before it reached the stage where it must now call the first witness to the stand.
Well, this was President Zuma's right to proceed in the manner that he did, and it is incorrect to say that he has not raised his concerns about Mr. Downer throughout. I'm glad that you have me in front of the cameras, because I've raised my concerns, and that was on the basis of the concerns that President Zuma raised with me about Mr. Downer for the past 22 years. I've watched the manner in which this man operates. He is unethical. He is not following the right legal procedures. He is a person who manipulates. He is a person who allows himself to be instructed by politicians, rogue politicians, who want to use this case and who've wanted to use this case throughout in order to attack President Zuma, to damage his political career, and now they continue to do so. So no, you're incorrect to say that President Zuma has not been on the issue of Mr. Downer throughout. And I am personally an example of someone who continued to raise the issues about Mr. Downer's behavior throughout the past 22 years.
Well, I'll also say that, the Supreme Court of Appeal found that, the former president was not prejudiced by this case because he went on to become, the first citizen of this country, being the president of the Republic of South Africa, despite the charges against him. But, Michelle, one thing Mr. Niehaus and I can agree on is that this matter has been nearly 2 decades in the making since the former president was first indicted. But again, it has hit a snag. We're waiting for the outcomes of that reconsideration application, and until then, this case cannot continue pending the outcome or the ruling to be handed down.
Very quickly, I don't suppose we know when we will get that ruling from the SCA.
Absolutely not, Michelle. You'll know that we're now in the hands or at the mercy of the courts. I know that they usually try as best as possible to issue judgments within 3 months since the last sitting. So that time hasn't necessarily lapsed from the time the reconsideration application was filed. And so any moment from now we could get that judgment. But again, really we're at the mercy of the Supreme Court of Appeal, who are still considering this, given the fact that also it's not often or every day, Michelle, that a reconsideration application is brought before the courts. I wouldn't say it's an unusual thing, but it's something that actually gets filed under extreme or exceptional circumstances.